Well, I was born in the Democratic Republic of Congo, and then Democratic Republic of Congo is a country that has sort of experienced a number of civil wars. And so when I was 1 year old, actually a little bit less than 1 year old, my family moved to Uganda. And so I grew up in a refugee camp called Kyangwari in Western Uganda. And at first, my family thought that we would be going back to DRC, our home country, but we didn't. So soon I turned 6 years old, and then I started going to school. So I started my entire primary school actually in the refugee camp. And when I was going to school, one of the biggest challenges that we had was, first of all, living in the refugee camp can be a little bit tough. And so going to schools at some point was also becoming, can I say, like a big chore for a young child who was like growing up. And so to me, school didn't seem like that much fun in terms of how content was delivered and how we engaged with learning, with the math, with the science and social studies. But of course, I couldn't do much by then. At the age of about 19 years old, I got an opportunity to go to South Africa to study for my high school. And I went to a high school called African Leadership Academy. For short, it's abbreviated as ALA. And there I was introduced to the concept of entrepreneurship. And it really boiled down to the idea that entrepreneurs are simply people who look at problems as opportunities or look at problems and try to find solutions. And of course, like having grown up in the refugee camp and then going to South Africa, it was a big milestone for me. And actually one of the few, can I say, young people who had an opportunity to actually leave the refugee camp and go to study somewhere else. And so anyway, I started sort of exploring this idea. First of all, I realized that I was lucky and it was a very big opportunity, for example, leaving the refugee camp and then going to South Africa. But then also I understood that, there were very many other children in my community back in the refugee camp who probably would never have such an opportunity. So for me, it was like, how do I extend this opportunity of an education to other children? So sort of reflecting back on my experience of learning in the refugee camp and going to school, I did wanted to work on the problem of making education more fun and more engaging. And specifically, how do you engage children who are growing up in the refugee camp? They don't have a lot of role models around them who are like doctors, engineers, to inspire them to work hard at school. But also children who come from communities that have faced a lot of adversity in terms of some of their children have lost their parents during the war. Some of the parents came to Uganda, but they left some of the children came to Uganda, but they left their parents in the DRC. Or you find a lot of challenges that children are facing who are in the refugee camp. So how do you inspire them and how do you encourage them to keep working hard at school? In the refugee camp, we don't have enough resources. Even if you have everything around you, you're getting food, like resources back in schools are not enough. For example, you find that a classroom has about 200 children in one class and one teacher is trying to teach all these children. So anyway, I wanted to find something that can help children engage with learning and have fun with it. And for me, it came down to a game. And then this is how I started working on the 5 STAZ educational game. And it's a game that really breaks down the Ugandan education curriculum into modularized packages that both children and teachers, or both teachers and students, can use in a classroom to be able to study and continue with learning. So my name is Joel Baraka, and currently I am based in Wisconsin, Madison. And right now I am actually working as a project engineer. So I started civil engineer, and I hope one day that I can become a construction project manager. I play soccer, a lot of soccer, which is football. In summer, we are mostly outside, which is always nice. And then lately I have been getting into running, so like outside, and sometimes I've participated like in events, sort of a number of events throughout the year to participate in running, whether it's like fundraising for a cause or just like getting together and running for fun. Well, it's tough. I wish I had a yes no answer or a specific answer, but I think it's tough, and I think it's even when I was in high school and trying to think about what I wanted to focus on as my own, it's like you pick your mountain or you pick the path you want to take. It came down to, is it they want to provide shelter? I mean, I studied civil engineering, and part of it I've always thought about one day going back to the refugee camp and building better houses. But I think it's hard to overcome those challenges because they are both, not both actually, like food, for example, shelter, these come as number one, if I can put it that way. So there's no direct answer of how to overcome that. I had to go to like school and see how education was changing my life. I thought that's where I could help the community most, with providing an education to school. Of course, even like right now, one of the things I think about is the fact that some children come to school and they've not eaten. When children are hungry, it's a very big challenge to study well and stuff like that. So the truth is, it's a little bit hard, and it's hard to say pick one. One of the things I've had to, I guess, come in peace with is the fact that when you're developing a solution or thinking about problem solving, you really need to consider sort of the community you're going to serve. So for example, it would be several times my team and I have thought about getting the 5 stars and then turning it into a mobile app, whereby we can make it available to even more schools and online, and very many people can access the game. But the truth is, the community that we set out to serve, the refugee camp communities, it will be very hard for them to access these resources online. So if we made the 5 stars digital, learning resource, it will be very hard for these communities to access. And so that's when we realized that we want to make this completely, physical, sort of a physical learning resource, because then we can be able to print and make it available to refugee camp communities that don't have access to internet and phones and computers and stuff like that. So it's been more about focusing on something that's sustainable, that can be able to reach these communities and serve them in the best way possible, rather than finding something that is disruptive. So I guess, I don't know if you've heard about these two terms, disruptive innovation and then sustainable innovation. A mobile app would be very disruptive in a community such as the refugee camp or in a rural community in Uganda. I think there's a lot that education can do, and it's already doing a lot, because I think even if I bring it to a very granular level, even to my personal experience, I think if it wasn't for education, for example, I wouldn't have, first of all, gone to high school. I wouldn't have gone to college. I wouldn't be in the US, to be honest, I think. So I think there's a lot that education can do, and especially there is a big impact that education can do to children, for example, who are growing up in rural communities and refugee camps, to children whose parents probably never went to school. And I'm talking about, the first generation students. There is a lot that education can do in terms of changing their lives, but also changing their communities and changing the countries that they come from. And then in terms of, what's happening in Uganda, and actually I think in many parts of, many countries that are still developing, there is a lot that, there's a lot that can change for good in terms of how education is delivered. So here, what I mean is, when you look at our education systems, for example, they are focused on grades. And when I talk about the grades, it's about who can get an A in this class, who can get 90, 100 by doing so well in the math. And what that I think has become, or what that has caused, is that children or teachers focus on helping children cram, and then children, of course, focus on cramming to be able to produce that same content on exams. And if you think about how the world is going, whereby right now it's nothing is linear, you have to raise children who can think for themselves. People have to be able to think about problems, work together with other, collaborate, and things of that kind. So I think there's a lot that can be done in terms of how education is delivered to make it more like a platform that can help people, not help, help students become more of thinkers and problem solvers rather than people who are just focused on tests. So what I'm saying here is, like, I think we need to have an education system that can help children think, help children become better communicators, help children become better collaborators, because I think that's what we need. First of all, I think right now, in terms of like mental health awareness and mental health, can I say, discussions in these communities such as refugee camps is very low. That engagement, or even like people knowing about the fact that mental health is real, that engagement is not there, or it's still very low. I think it can get better. And I think part of it is because, again, when you think about when people get displaced from their home country and then they go to, say, refugee camps, it's very sad that, again, you realize that it's a very hard question to sort of, can I say, tackle when it becomes, do you provide food first, do you provide shelter first, or do you provide services like mental health centers? It's a very tricky question. It's a very tricky question, if I can put it. But I think absolutely, like, increasing education about mental health and providing mental health services and facilities within these communities could definitely help a lot. So I feel like there is a need for these services, only that I think the need ends up sort of being ignored, and the focus becomes providing shelter, providing food, which again, at some time you have to choose which one do you have to provide first. And I think part of it is because of limited resources and, of course, limited professionals at some point. But I think absolutely providing these services would help a lot. Yeah. And even in schools, I think even schools, for example, teachers who teach in these communities, I think having some form of training. I'm not saying a teacher should go to school to have a degree in, like being a psychiatrist, but I think having some form of training on how to deal with children who came from a displaced community, who might be struggling with maybe not having their parents, I think would be very, very helpful. I think it's as simple as games being a language that children can understand best, and I think a space when there's a game or an opportunity for children to play, you find that they're at their best. Even children who have, say, problems at home, you find that they're shouting at the best of their ability, they're shouting on top of their lungs, they're excited, they're engaged and all that. So I think for me, games has always been a way for you to engage people, but also to give people a space whereby they can be themselves. I showed you the 5 stars, and you guys can see how it's spelled. It's the 5 stars with A to Z, and I can break it down. So when we first tried to develop this game, besides it being a learning resources, we wanted it to be a game that can also inspire children. And so we're like, okay, if it has to inspire children, the name itself has to be something that sparks curiosity in the minds of the children when they see the game. So number one, I have always believed that children, regardless where they are from, they can reach for the stars, or they can be the best versions of themselves and who they are meant to be, provided that they're given the right resources. So this A to Z was meant to remind teachers and students that we want to develop this game and this product into something that can provide a complete, can I say, textbook or learning module or learning resource to these children to be able to do well in primary school. So A to Z, like, for example, cover the whole educational curriculum of Uganda into a game. Of course, we're still working on that. And then why I made it STAZ, it was these children are meant for the stars. And again, like, if they're meant for the STAZ and then they're given the resource, they can become the best version of themselves. And again, this is just a random number. 5 to us seems like a good number. Like if you got 5 children engaging, I think you wouldn't be too worried of them being very many and being distracted. I think it's a good number. So that's why it's the 5 stars. It's been a learning process for me. And so developing, for example, this game with my team, who are also like, it's a team of young people, and trying to attempt to summarize the Ugandan education curriculum into a game has been a challenge. But that has been easier to do because we have like a team of teachers who have been very supportive. So that has sort of become less of a problem, more of an opportunity to learn and work with these teachers. The other challenge has been like being young and then not having enough resources, whereby I have like a company that has a lot of money and then I can start a foundation. It's like I'm constantly on the move to work with my team to improve the content of the game, develop the game further, but also on the run to fundraise and raise money to make these games available. And then of course on the run to continue to improve the designs and improve the moves in the game and all that. So I think finding the resources that we need to make these games available to as many schools as possible has been a very big challenge. The first time when I knew how to write my name and my parents, realized that I can write my name or I can write their names. Like one of the big things that were in the refugee camp is to know how to read, like it was like how to read names, how to read like small letters that were sent to your family, how to read what's written on medication, like even figuring out how many tablets do I have to take per day. And so you realize that when a family had a child who can read small letters that were sent to them, can read how to take medication, it was a very big deal. Yet like that's a very, very, very fundamental thing to know. Like no one should be struggling or be like knowing how to read like a small mail be a very big accomplishment. But to these communities, it's a very, very big deal, whereby even knowing how to read or write something small is a very, very, can I say, important step. So I would say people should not take it for granted.